I like to take this opportunity to touch on some of the questions I hear over and over again in my sessions. And I figured, even if you can't afford to take lessons with me, or if you don't have the time to take lessons with me, this would still benefit just about everyone. Like, doesn't matter what level you're at. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Question number 1. I have a really high score, or I have a really big vocabulary, but somehow my spoken English is still not the most ideal. It's not fluid enough. It's not accurate enough a lot of times. And sometimes I can't even come up with things to say. A lot of people seem to have created this false dichotomy between textbook English and actual authentic English, and more specifically in the form of communicating, coming up with ideas, actually coming up with things to say right in that moment. I like to take a different approach and kind of demolish this dichotomy. My belief, or I guess my theory, is that a lot of times it's not that people are like good at one thing, it's that exams are not indicative of your real English level, because there's many different techniques. Lots of times people don't really spend the required amount of time to actually get to that level. Like, for instance, I myself grew up playing the piano. And if you're Chinese, you know that every summer, just about, or every year, there's like a test or competition that you attend in order to get that level. I got to almost the top, like I got level 8, we'll call it 八级, but it doesn't indicate that my English, or my piano in this case, is like at that level. Like, if you were to give me a new music score and just ask me to sight read, even if it's like a lower level than level 8, because I had always only practiced only 4 pieces in that 1 year, all my basics, all my foundation was still lacking. It doesn't matter how much vocab you think you have, how much you scored in a certain test, even if it's like IELTS or TOEFL, a very comprehensive test already, but it still is not the most foolproof, airtight indication of where you're currently at. It's even less accurate if you use a lot of like exam techniques like 应试技巧、背单词，这些很多时候并不能说明你真正的掌握这些单词。Right? I have a lot of students coming to me and they're like either working or studying in America or any other foreign country. And a lot of times they have like over 10 or 9,000 vocab and they still somehow can't speak. The first response I always tell them is that you don't actually know. Like, you think you know that many words, but you have a rough idea. Like, you know the most basic Chinese translation of these words, and especially when it comes to abstract words. So there are 2 major categories of all the vocab. One is abstract, like I said. It's basically all the verbs and adjectives, things that you can't touch, things that you can't physically see. It's more like an action or a verb, a feeling, a certain abstract concept, okay? So these words are actually really versatile but also at the same time very practical and useful. But the downside of only studying these words with Chinese translation and very few translations / definitions, you don't see the full scope of all the definitions, especially when it comes to abstract words. Not to mention, you rarely ever, because you spend so much time memorizing vocab, you rarely ever see them in a context. So there's no way for you to actually know how to use this word. And if you don't use a dictionary, like an actual dictionary, not like 有道翻译 or 百度翻译, you can think of them in terms of phrases. So the quality of these vocab, especially when it comes to abstract words, words is very low. So your regular vocab test doesn't indicate, there's no way for it to indicate just the quality of your vocab. And when it comes to outputting ideas, especially in terms of writing and speaking, of course, you don't actually need a lot of vocab. Like, you don't need quantity, you need quality. You need to actually master your words, and without massive amounts of input, without careful study of these words in dictionary. I'm not talking about slang, I'm not talking about idioms, things that are kind of out of the norm and, you know, kind of anomaly. I'm just speaking purely in terms of words that we've all learned, okay? Like things like go, hang, hit, get, take. All these words we've learned in middle school or high school at the very least. But without looking them up in a dictionary, or, you know, if you have the resources, without studying them with like a bona fide native speaker teacher and asking them questions, like extensively ask them questions about how to use each and every single word like this. A lot of times people would say to me like, oh, my spoken English is the worst, but my listening is okay. Like, I can understand roughly what people are talking about. But the thing is, if you only have like such a low quality, like if your grasp of these vocab is so low, you think you understand them, but you don't. Like, you're just kind of making do with what you think you know, and a lot of times you're guessing. And so when your brain is kind of preoccupied, because it's busy guessing what the other person is saying and busy also trying to translate every English word into Chinese, you don't have the mental capacity to think of things that you can say. So what I tell people in order to solve this problem is to stop fixating on like outputting ideas, and especially outputting ideas in the form of speaking. Because yeah, it's like trying to run before you know how to walk properly. And instead try to study, like really study, not memorize, okay? When I tell people I don't memorize any vocab, people think that I don't value or I don't prioritize vocabulary, when that's totally not the case. And it's the opposite. Like, I probably spend more energy on vocab. Although I'm not like killing myself over here. Like, I'm not struggling. I'm not forcing myself to do anything. It's actually fun when you can really dig deep into these very common, very versatile words. Versatile. Whichever way you say this word, by the way, is correct, okay? Versatile. It's like interesting versus interesting. Just a side note. Okay, especially if you kind of excel in school, excel in exam English, let that idea go, okay? One of the first things that my dad, like my English mentor, told me is that even if you scored like 100 in a prestigious, very recognized test like IELTS or TOEFL, just consider yourself like a passing grade, okay? You have certain foundation, you have like a basic understanding of the grammar, you have a basic understanding of how English works, you know the alphabet. That's not nothing, but other than that, just let that shit go. Like, you haven't actually read a lot in English. You haven't actually, like when people watch TV in the name of learning English, they rarely spend time reading the subtitles and single out words that are probably going to help them in everyday English, or look them up in a dictionary. Like, rarely do people do that. So when you don't have that, when you don't have a consistent input, how can you expect yourself to speak so fluently? You know, same as Chinese. Like, we all speak Chinese. It's our first language. That 我们大家母语都是中文，但是为什么有的人口才就好，有的人口才就不行，有的人文笔好，有的人文笔不行？可能你跟我看的书的量都是一样的，但是我们看的书的种类可能不一样，对不对？然后我们看书的时候有多认真也是不一样的。可能你遇到一个生词的时候，你就是会查字典，然后会做好词好句的这种摘抄，而我就是一目十行，囫囵吞枣。第一次见到的单词我不懂，我也不查，然后我上下文没有办法判断出来这个单词是什么意思的时候，我也不查， 那我这样我跟你看的是同样一本书的时候，出来的结果还是不一样。And most importantly, I want to say, like, when it comes to input, like I tell people, like, focus on input. And a lot of people confuse that with, okay, now I'm just going to start listening to BBC and CNN. There's no discernment when it comes to what materials, what kind of input they should start with. And I'm just going to assume that most people have not even dealt with the most basic, most common 3,000 words that we encounter in everyday life. They kind of skipped the first step. And when you skip a very important step and try to move on to like very academic words, very academic language, first of all, it's not going to help you with your everyday communication. And second of all, you're not going to be as productive and you're going to tire yourself very easily, especially when those words are supposed to help you transition onto the next step. And by the way, the most common 3,000 words, like maybe I didn't do a good job of like explaining what it is. Like they have calculated if you can get a basic but sufficient grasp of these words, that will account for 82% of all your English usage, be it in the form of writing or speaking or listening or understanding. But the key is you can't just know like the most basic and most of the time not accurate Chinese translations of these words. So stop memorizing vocab lists. Stop doing that. Go find a language material that has those words, or you could just start looking words up in a list. Like I'll give you the list, I'll give you the PDF. Before you know it, first of all, you're gonna start feeling like, okay, I actually understand what this native speaker is speaking, like fully, 100% understand. And even if I don't understand a certain word, I can catch them really fast. And provided that your pronunciation and grammar are like donezo, like taken care of. And this is where I come in, okay? Pronunciation, grammar is where I thrive. Like I can pinpoint exactly which problem you're suffering from. Not to say that you can't do it on your own, but it's just that when you work with me, it's faster. Okay, so provided that your grammar, pronunciation, that's all dealt with. Once you start like digging deeper into the 3,000 words, first of all, you won't panic when a native speaker is talking to you. And even if there's a word that you don't know or haven't heard of, you can safely just pick that word out and ask them what that word means. So rather than trying to like speak and output ideas, just accept that your input is already kind of low. So don't try to run before you can walk. But what I can help you is give you the confidence. And when you have a full comprehension of what the other person is speaking, even if you can just say one sentence every 10 sentences that the other person have said to you, you'll feel much greater. Before you know it, you'll have so much input that you'll naturally want to have some kind of output, like outflow. And it will start with, first of all, writing. Like, I don't know why people are not writing. Like, I don't know why they're not as obsessed about writing as they are about speaking. Like, when people talk about output, they really talk about writing things or writing a draft right before you speak, or, public speaking, which ultimately is prepared writing, and you're just reciting what you've written. Like, when you think about it, speaking is just a faster version of writing. And so when you suck at a slower version of writing, which is just writing itself, how do you expect to be accurate and actually make sense when you speak? Like, the math is not mathing, my friends. That's it for today. Hopefully my hair isn't so messed up.